You know, here lately I've been watching my friends play Baldur's Gate, and it's a pretty fucking awesome looking game. I haven't played it myself yet, so I can't pass judgment there. But as far as RPGs go, this is the most interesting one I've checked out since The Witcher 3. It really does look that fucking good from everything I've seen. And I can't wait till payday so I can check it out. However, with all good things, there's eventually that one certain group of people that want to make a big old fuss over it. And this time it's my favorite group of people, the fucking weebs. And of course, because they're always thinking with the wrong head, their biggest complaint is the fact that journos and regular people are all happy and excited with this game and all its raunchiness, yet they condemn anime. Feel like there's some important context being left out of that discussion there. But no, it couldn't be anything like that, it's just some hypocrisy they've finally caught on to. And thus far, the loudest voice I've seen covering that talking point has been none other than OtakuDaikun, with this really, really dogshit video. Why hello there, a quick little intermission from future me. Turns out an even louder and even more familiar retard's weighed in on this entire controversy, none other than Synthetic Man.
That is allowed to have sex scenes and is praised by the puritanical left-wing media. But anime is the worst thing ever. Everyone who likes anime is a pedo. And I think if you're one of the few people confused as to why this is the case, the simple answer is that anime girls are attractive and Western girls are not. It's really that simple, guys.
So it seems there could be a future video on that one in particular because the rest of the video is fucking horseshit as usual, but oh boy, the fact that he's on this side, that ought to speak to the intelligence of the people peddling this argument. But anywho, I'll burn that bridge after I cross it. Anywho, back to it.
Welcome back to the Side for Rest. I want to die here. That's kind of funny.
And I don't think there needs to be any more prep, so let's just jump right into it.
The only double standards I'll tolerate are double D's.
This guy, does he think he's funny? Is that what he's going for?
You know, it's still cringe as fuck that this is the only thing you're going to be making jokes about, but it would have been marginally better by a very, very, very tiny bit if you would have said something along the lines of, oh, it's standard for double D's instead of just double D's. Like, bruh, you fucked up your own joke. Also, yes, he decided to dust off the AI voice filter, that way he could cover this one. That's right, that's not a real chick. I guess he just felt like cosplaying as his imaginary wife again, who of course dresses like a total hooker. But then again, I shouldn't be surprised that that's how low his standards are. So to save all of your appetites, I brought the best thing I can to cover this shit up. Ah, much better.
And once again, I'm here because prudes are infringing on my rights to enjoy fiction.
Spoiler alert, the way they're infringing is by making cringy articles on the Mary Sue and Kotaku, in which all they do is describe the absurdest fucking things you can do, like the bear scene that everyone talks about this game. Oh no, such a menace, I hope you can recover from that.
The catalyst for today's summing is Baldur's Gate 3, a Western RPG that came out in August. I have nothing to say about the game's quality itself, but rather some of the things you can do in the game. Let's not beat around the bush. Hell, I'll shake a clean to admit that Baldur's Gate 3 has many adult themes. Like Cyberpunk 4, the game's character creation mode allows you to customize genitalia with surprising detail. For instance, if you do a hero trouser snake, you can get what it has a hood on, if you get what I'm saying. This stuff gets put to good use in various intimate scenes, the most infamous being when you romance a druid who turns into a bear. In second place, you can walk in on some ogres getting down and dirty. That's a double dose of zoophilia right there.
I had a friend point this out for me, but the ogre thing is a fucking lie right there. One of them is an orc. So there's an actually moment right there for all the people that have actually played the game. But as for the fact that this kind of stuff is in the game at all, it's entirely optional. You can avoid it if you want. And that's the extent I'm going to say on it. And that's the wonderful thing about RPGs like this, or Mass Effect and other games like it, where if you don't want to have gay sex with aliens or fuck a bear, you ain't got to. You can always just avoid that playstyle entirely. And above all, the sex scenes are entirely skippable. Ain't it a wonder when these developers will solve these imaginary problems for you before you even make them?
Without question, Baldur's Gate 3 is a degenerate game. Don't get me wrong, I love degeneracy, but I bring it up because the folks who normally condemn this stuff are suspiciously celebrating it.
Well yeah, it's almost like this specific type of degeneracy strictly involves adults. And most importantly is skippable, and there's actually more to it than just the degeneracy. So nice job with this false equivalence here.
Instead of condemning the game for its raunchy antics, they're praising it, which is something they never do when it comes to anime games, or honestly, any Japanese media in general.
Probably because with that Japanese media, the raunchiness is like 95% of the experience. Whereas with Baldur's Gate, it's like less than 5%. And again, there's not a kid in sight when it comes to this sexual stuff, so it's an automatic W there.
So yeah, there's no shortage of headlines pointing out how relentlessly thirsty Baldur's Gate 3 is. Apparently, there are plenty of other things the game does well, but this is what most of the media has chosen to focus on.
And of course, their go-to example for most of the media is the fucking Mary Sue, or Kotaku, or Polygon, or any other dying publications that rely on clickbait and outrage farming.
According to the Mary Sue, your ability to bang a bear is proof that your game is good.
It's a joke!
Normally, I'd agree. If a game can show off a bit of fan service before launch, I at least know the developers aren't being prudish or kowtowing to ESG. But the Mary Sue, what's up with that?
Gee, I wonder why they would focus so much on sex. I mean, it's not like sex sells or anything like that, you know. It's just a total mystery.
Discussion on social media exploded when PC Gamer expressed its love for the game's adult content, and anime fans humbly pointed out that such words are never spoken about Japanese games, or even Asian games at large.
I've already explained why this is the case a few times. I'm not going to repeat myself too many more. But I love how they're one example of people not giving as much praise to Japanese games that give this kind of content is Xenochronicles 2, the game where they'd watered down literally everything and made it nothing but horny virgin simulator number 5011. Like it should say something when the first Xenoblade game is generally regarded as a good game overall, yet the second one is nothing but waifus, and that's the only thing anyone ever talks about it. But sure, that played no part in it and people only didn't like it because it was made in Japan. You know, never mind the fact that some of the most circle-jerk video games in the entire history of the medium were made in Japan. Nope, the West is just so racist when it comes to booby games.
Typically, one of these games isn't being called sexist, objectifying, or misogynistic. Abilities be slanderous, out of date, for modern sensibilities. Don't forget, when Project E spoke dangerous protagonists as legal attractive, designed from a bygone era. That same website shall praise unspoken, and I don't need to tell you how that worked out. This isn't the first time we've seen a strange acceptance of sexuality in a Western game. The Last of Us Part 2 featured a full-on, caught in 4K sex scene featuring strong female character Abby.
You know, you really gotta love how their example of a quotations accepted sex scene in a Western game was not only published by a Japanese company, but most importantly, this scene was universally panned by everyone. Even the most hardcore Last of Us Part 2 defenders would agree. This scene dragged on for way too long and was really, really out of place. Did the aforementioned dying journos try and get some rage bait views? Yes, and that's all they were. Nobody genuinely liked this scene, so this point is moot as fuck.
I remember back when we all assumed she was a man. Sorry, Laura Bailey, but your voice is much better suited to a good game like Catherine.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
Come to think of it, Catherine's one of the only Japanese games I can think of where its adult themes aren't mocked.
Yeah, and it's a total mystery why that's the case.
The thing about Catherine, though, is that it never actually showed people being busy, and if it did, we know the game would have given adults only rating, completely neutered on Sony consoles. That's what makes the Abby scene so insulting. Why she asked when countless Japanese games get covered up for far less? There's a huge hint of irony to this whole mess. Consider the Abby scene was actually censored from the Japanese version of Last of Us. You see, Japan, despite being a haven of degenerate fiction, isn't actually allowed to show full frontal nudity in any of its console games. The Sero ratings board just doesn't allow for it. Their PC market is an entirely different story, but for console releases, you will never see genitalia, or so much as a woman's nipple. All these Eastern games the West complains about have never gone past a skimpy outfit like this one from Dead or Alive.
They've never gone past it because they literally can't go any further than it. It's literally a bunch of strings. But you gotta love how they solve their imaginary problem for themselves by pointing out the fact that the Japanese media and their own ratings board doesn't allow this nudity content, and goes out of its way to cover it up. Yet they're very quick to blame the West for this type of shit. It's just like I said, they're never thinking with the right head.
Games like Senran Kagura, which are absolutely dripping with libido, only accomplished their antics through clever comedic censors. You would need to mod these games to see any further, and if, God forbid, you do see someone above, they're shown with Barbie all anatomy. That's right, the most indecent thing to come from a Japanese console game is undressing a toy that kids have been playing with for decades. Meanwhile, here's a scene that would only be featured in an adults-only game, being sold as a PlayStation exclusive with an M rating. Sony's censor station is notorious for demanding that Asian devs censor far tamer visuals. And here they are using an adult scene from a Western game as a special promotion.
Firstly, they never used the scene in any kind of promotional material, ever. It was there, it was in the game, but it was never on any posters. And secondly, this scene was most likely a point of contention between Sony and Neil Cuckman. Thing is, Neil Cuckman is notorious for being a whiny bitch whenever someone dares to challenge his ideas, which is why the scene, despite being hated by literally everyone, still made it through into the final game. You can bitch and moan all day about how Sony is censoring out your precious anime games, but if you don't recognize that Neil is the biggest problem in this situation, then you're just fucking retarded. I mean, you're retarded either way, but at least you can be sensibly retarded.
How is this not a double standard? I recall someone in the industry defending The Last of Us by saying the scene was appropriate because it wasn't meant to be attractive or titillating.
I love here example of someone in the industry defending this is a random motherfucker on Twitter who just so happens to have a retarded take on this all the same. And it should say something when that's your best example of someone trying to defend this shit.
It's not one of those nail-gaze situations. Therefore, it's a valid form of art rather than exploitive objectification. First off, I love how they admit that Abby is appealing. As funny as that is, I've seen this argument before with regard to censorship, and it's absolutely disgusting when you read enough to what it implies. Basically, they're saying that explicit material is acceptable so long as produced straight men don't get off with. This logic is ironic, and that actually enables misogyny. Dictating what women can and can't reveal based on men's preferences is a critical part of patriarchy. Dudes used to demand their wives cover up to prevent other men from lusting after their property. This strategy never worked either, since people are so thirsty that they can develop a fetish for just about anything. Plus, the more you tell someone not to look at something, the more tempting it becomes to disobey. Things become sexier when you're told you can't have them. Therefore, banning or censoring certain content only drags more attention to it and further limits how people can express themselves.
Oh boy, there's so much to unpack with this one. Firstly, the more you tell someone that they can't have something, the sexier it becomes. Awfully sus right there. Like, let's stop beating around the bush. We know you're talking about lolicon with that without having to say it. And the fact that you're calling that sexy is very telling. But more importantly, the Streisand effect only goes so far. And when people have it ingrained that there are very serious repercussions for looking at certain material, then they're not going to do it no matter what, unless they're already predisposed to wanting to look at that material. Like, no amount of playing hard to get is going to get someone to go over legal boundaries. At least not a normal functioning person in society. But more importantly, the idea of it dragging more attention to the subject when you try and cover it up really only happens if you're sloppy about it. And you give every retard a voice on the subject. And as for it censoring other people and limiting their creativity, if they can only express themselves through hoo tee hee sexy, then they're fucking retarded and they need to be chastised a little bit more. If you can't make the effort to make decent conversations without it devolving into sex, then yeah, I wouldn't want to have a conversation with you, period. Especially if it brings in very taboo things like children, animals, what the fuck ever. And if it sounds like I'm going all over the place on this one, it's because this entire point went all over the place on this one. Most of all, it has fuck all to do with Baldur's Gate, so I don't know why we're even talking about it. If we could maybe, get to the point sometime today, that'd be nice. But no, instead we're gonna keep on waffling to make sure we get over the 10-minute mark.
Imagine telling an athlete that she can't wear a sports bikini just because spectators are distracted by it. Fetishes are everywhere, and rather than trying to suppress them, you're better off addressing them when people pursue them inappropriately.
Meanwhile, you're over here spurging over the fact that Sony's censoring literal fucking children in their games being sexualized. How horrifying, I know.
This girl right here is mega hot, but it's not like I can't rock climbing because people do it to themselves like this. You can cover someone from head to ankle, but still find a way to draw them off their toes. You can't judge what's appropriate or not based on how horny people get. A sex scene is a sex scene, regardless of whether it's cute or not. Another excuse for why games like The Last of Us and Baldur's Gate get a free pass to Lewd Town is that they feature adult characters. In contrast, Japanese media is seen as problematic by these people for having adult scenes with minors.
Gee, it's almost like it's a normal thing to be disgusted by the fact that people want to have sex with children, no matter the context. I wonder why people would see a problem with that, and be more lenient with material that exclusively involves adults with other adults.
While that does happen quite often due to cultural differences.
Cultural differences like the fact that child porn was completely legal in Japan for literal decades. So quite often, that's only just a tiny bit of a fucking understatement.
I feel this argument is in bad faith for assuming that anime characters are inherently childlike.
You fuck young boys, Valdez.
In just about all the examples that are provided, yes, they are. And what few examples that do happen to be adults that just happen to have a short body and such, they're conveniently put under the same label as minors. I wonder why. It's almost like they're trying to make this as murky as possible and try and keep this shit in the industry as long as possible in order to siphon money from pedophiles. But no, it couldn't be that, no.
It isn't fair to the art style at all.
When the art style has specific ways that it draws adults and how it draws children, and they're caught using the children designs in sexual situations, yes, it is completely fair to call it out.
Plus, the argument doesn't account for the many times obvious adults are censored in Asian games. Journalists are hell-bent to down anime, even when it features busty, MILF-like characters such as sorcerers and dragons round. Let's not forget that Sony had Trish's butt covered up with a lens flare for Devil May Cry 5.
Oh no, the Japanese company wanted to censor a Japanese game being published in American waters? Most importantly, when the nudity added fucking nothing to the scene at all? How dare they? It's almost like they were sensible enough to realize, hey, we're just adding this shit for the sake of adding it. How about we not do that? But no, it can't be anything like that. They're just censoring it because, oh my god, some nudity. Can't have that unless it's made in America. Like, you really this desperate for examples that you're gonna omit this very important context here?
Surely she was an obvious adult. In recent years, Capcom's really eaten up this ESG smegma too, declaring that Japan's standards are hurtful to the West. Excuse me, but if we can have The Last of Us and South Park, trust me, we'll survive if Jill and Tifa wear actual skirts.
Oh, here we go. We're on a roll with these really bad examples here, because within 10 seconds of Googling, you'd find that both Jill and Tifa had their skirts changed into skorts or what the fuck ever it is, for gameplay purposes in the case of Tifa, or for Jill in the case of doing something different. I don't like the fact they did that for the classic costume, but that's a different discussion entirely. Had nothing to do with Japan's societal norms being different from the West.
Perhaps the worst offense of this Western double standard comes from the idea that Baldur's Gate hates literacy are queer-friendly. Sir, that's not an object to be LGBT, so for bisexual, not bestiality. This argument reads the whole beta free debacle, where journalists condemn pain as raunchiness the moment you call a male lover. According to these poisoned minds, it's only okay to call homosexuality in your game, but if you're straight, then it's just sexist and objectifying. This is the kind of logic that allows folks to wear gimsuits around children at pride parades, while I will black mention dance, under boob. I'll move on from that though, since I already covered pain at thoroughly in a different video. Ultimately, anime fans are just making a simple observation. If Western devs can make degenerate games and be praised for it, why can't Japanese ones?
They could, if they put the actual effort into making something other than just the sex appeal. Case in point, Tales of Berseria, my favorite game of all time. Sex appeal is all over Velvet, and you would know since it's all over your fucking channel. And it pisses me off seeing such a good character and such a cool scene being put in one of your shit videos. Yet the game has so much more to it other than just the sex appeal of Velvet's outfit. And most people agree, it's a fucking solid game. So this little observation is moot, and made by complete retards who are leaving out some very, very important context. But then again, would they really be weebs if they didn't leave out such important details in their bitching and moaning?
It's not even praise we're looking for, but simply a right to exist without being berated or censored. Why is that so hard? That's what she said.
You're not funny and nobody likes you.
One thing I don't see get brought up much regarding this double standard is the treatment of Code Vein when it first launched.
Nobody brings it up because it's a completely irrelevant game to this discussion that came out 4 years ago. And more importantly, is very, very tame when it comes to the sexual aspects. Yes, there's the bitch in the shop in the bikini top. And yes, you have that one character whose boobs are bigger than her face. And yes, you have the option without any mods whatsoever to go around the apocalypse in nothing but a beach towel. But aside from superficial shit like that, sexuality is barely a factor in the game at all. Therefore, very few people actually gave a shit about it. So for the umpteenth time, it looks like your only examples are going to be random motherfuckers on Twitter or dying publications looking for outrage views.
This is one of those rare cases where a Japanese anime-themed console game was specifically directed to mature audiences, and yet it still got flack for daring to have boobs and skimpy outfits.
This article that you're showing is the first and only bit of this I've ever seen.
Fuck you! I was right! Fuck you! I was right!
I remember this article from Rock Paper Shotgun by Matt Cox, called the game sexist for sexy ladies, although our adults mind you. I quote humor and others really want to amend the too, but that's not the case here. Instead, you can just the eye candy in general, specifically saying this is going to be consistently embarrassing movie, isn't it? Bruh, some white knight for feminists playing another game already, they are going to fuck you. Seriously, we have the articles praising videos with them. It's not just for straight guys either. You can play as a woman and still wear thighs, just like any guy can. Of course, you couldn't have a censorship video without article of the gamer, which claims about how unrealistic the rest physics are. If someone please tell them that their boobs and flimsy dresses don't stay perfectly spherical, maybe they don't, but wouldn't it be cool if they did? This is a game about post-apocalyptic vampires. Your first blood lets you cast magic and wield swords twice your size. Selective realism much? Let's wrap things up with some extra juicy irony. You'd think that if writers are complaining about how boobs work, they would want a realistic, believable experience. And yet the developers for Baldur's Gate are pissed that most players seem to be aiming for just that.
I love how your example of them being pissed off at the fact that people make basic fucking characters is a fucking joke they make. The fact they referenced the default Fallout dweller didn't tip you off to that? Like shit, I guess all of Akita's sarcastic replies are him being pissed off at people. No, you're just a fucking idiot. But in any sense, it's not exactly irony that people were complaining about boobs not being completely realistic in a completely different game, and then turning around and making basic bitch characters in their fantasy game. Sorry to hear that Google in your office is broken, though.
With that being the case, it's really no surprise that the most popular romance option in this game isn't a bear or an ogre, but rather a cute elf girl. This just shows how journalists, and even Western developers, are trying to appeal to a crowd that doesn't accurately represent what their players seem to want.
No, what this proves is the fact that there are people who want a normal experience in a fantasy game, or at least as close to normal as you can get, and there are people that want the outlandish, weird shit. And the game's able to provide both, and it's awesome because of that. That's why it's getting so much praise, even with all of its degeneracy. I know you struggle with very simple concepts like this, but the rest of us don't.
The narrative they're desperate to spin isn't even working for them. With that plain as day for everyone to see, all I ask for is the right to have mature, degenerate games of my own, without being judged or censored for it.
No, you're gonna get judged no matter what when you post shit like this on the internet. And yes, I've been just as judgmental to my friends playing Baldur's Gate and getting all horny over it. I've definitely had the bonk sound effect ready. But you know what the best way to reduce the amount of flack you get for the degenerate games you play is? You don't play the ones that have kids in them.
It's that easy!
The concept of safe horny isn't even a real thing. What you choose to fap to doesn't make you superior to anyone else.
Yes, it does. And if this game makes some people fat to bears, yes, I'll be just as judgmental, but you know what? If they're really that dedicated, my only concern is making sure they don't have a rifle or a tranquilizer, nothing like that. And then I'm gonna encourage them. You know why? It's gonna get rid of some stupid people. And plus, it'll be hilarious if they recreate that one Death from 1,000 Ways to Die where the guy took some shrooms and went for a walk in California, stumbled onto some furries and thought he was getting some with a really elaborate bear costume, tried to stick Winnie in the poo hole and fucking died. You know, if someone wants to recreate that, go right the hell ahead. It'll get rid of stupid people, and it'll be funny as fuck.
At the end of the day, it's all just fiction, and I wish for all this weeb shaming, incel Coomer language to burn in hell where it belongs.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
Never gonna happen, sweet cheeks. But anywho, that's gonna do it for this video, but surprisingly that's not where the drama ends because they uploaded yet another one in the time it took me to make this video. Still using the cosplay of his wife and everything. Now I'm not gonna respond to the entire video because it's mostly just complaining about the same shit and still missing the obvious jokes like the bear thing being Game of the Year contending material. I know, how dare these publications want to make a joke when talking about this game. But above all else, this video is just them admitting that the main thing these publications are going for is outrage views. So they're aware of what the problem is, yet they're actually going to keep contributing to it in the name of this imaginary double standard that again only exists if you cut out very, very crucial context to each situation. So with that, we can write this motherfucker off as yet another disingenuous retard who wants to cosplay as a hooker. You do you, but we're going to judge you all the same, baby blue. And with that being said, I'm going to call the video there. Moral of the story? Buy Baldur's Gate. It's fucking awesome, whether you're a degenerate or if you just want a regular-ass RPG. The game's got you covered in droves. And this is coming from someone who hasn't even played it yet. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and solve that. Let me know what y'all think though. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. And with that being said, I'll talk to y'all later.
I'm gay.
I'm a lesbian.
I am actually pansexual.
I am transgender.